People Like Us project's hosting a series of wellbeing and mental health chats with our partners from West London NHS. Today, we are joined by Gwyneth, who is a specialist occupational therapist at West London NHS Trust. Today, she has joined us to discuss her experiences during university and how culture may influence seeking diagnosis. During the session, Gwyneth will hopefully answer some of your questions that you may have around this and provide you with some wellbeing tips. We would really love your feedback on the sessions and love to hear from you on what other topics you want from us. In the comment section, we've added 2 short questions, so please like and comment with your feedback. But for now, welcome, Gwyneth.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. So kind of want to just start with your experiences during university and how that process went and some of the things that came up for you that might impact some of our students here.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just give a bit of a background, like who I am and where I've kind of come from. So my name is Gwyneth. I am currently working as a specialist occupational therapist, and I work in the West London NHS Trust. I studied my undergrad, I think I started in 2009. So 3-year degree, 3 undergrad degree, started when I was 18. So for a bit more context, my cultural heritage background, I'm Nigerian, so my parents were Nigerian. I'm first generation, so my parents were immigrants, and I was born here in England. So obviously I've gone to university, very optimistic, started my degree, really kind of like looking forward to learning a bit more about the subject that I've picked. And my first year, for the most part, it was okay. As I continued on in my studies, I'd noticed things started to get a bit more difficult. The work was it was just hard. It was I found it very challenging to kind of get everything I needed to get done. Sometimes with understanding the work, understanding assignments, being able to get assignments done, a lot of procrastination, or feeling like I didn't have enough time to kind of get things that I needed to get done. And as a result, I really struggled whilst I was doing my undergraduate studies. Obviously, coming from the background that I've come from, there is always this emphasis of, having to do well and performing well academically. It was, quite an important thing from, my cultural background and, kind of from my mum. These were things that were very important, kind of going to school, getting your degree, and being like an accomplished professional, essentially. And I think at some point in my studies, it became so difficult. And I remember coming home and crying to my mum and saying, I don't think I can finish this degree. I'm really struggling with it. I'm really finding it quite difficult. And to the best that she could, she did try and, encourage me and reassure me and, just kind of, it was more encouragement to just kind of like see it through and get it done, which I did, but it was really difficult. I remember in my 3rd year, I failed every single module and I had to retake everything because at that point things were just, really tough. And then I ended up staying an extra year because there was one module that I failed twice. So I had to repeat it for a following year, which was fine. And by the time I finished my degree, I was just like, that was horrendous. It was awful. Never want to do that again. And, I was quite set on never going back into education. So fast forward to, and that would have been I think I graduated in 2013. But as a result of how much I struggled within university, I was left with a lot of other kind of mental health difficulties. So like depression, anxiety. These were things that really played a part, during that period of time. But because of the cultural background I'd come from, going to seek support for my mental health was just not something that I thought I had to do. I also came from a very religious background, so a lot of it was like, kind of like turn to God, pray about it. These are going to be things that really support you. And I remember going to the GP at a stage, and I think she'd offered me counselling, she'd offered me like an antidepressant, and I was like, oh no, I don't want to take medication, and I don't think I need counselling, it's just, I'll be fine. And I went to church a lot, and I tried to do these things to kind of support me, but they didn't get better. So for a period of time, I would say up until recently, and in between, when I graduated, there was a lot of up and downs with my mental health generally after I finished university. Eventually, I did start taking antidepressant, but I started therapy first, to kind of support my mental health. And I was like, okay, as I got a bit older, I thought, okay, these are tools that probably could help, and they have been helpful. But fast forward to 2021, I made the decision to go back to university, although I had like a horrendous time during my undergrad. And, I thought I'm a bit older, I'm a bit more mature, I'll probably be able to approach it differently and do things differently. And, maybe the difficulties that I had during my undergrad were because I was quite young and, didn't really understand what I was doing. So I had my so I'm doing a part-time master's, which is 3 years. And as I got to the end of the first year, I was like, this year was really tough. It was really difficult. And it was quite reflective of how difficult I had found my undergraduate degree as well. And at that point, I had 2 sisters who had been diagnosed with ADHD as adults. And when they were telling me about some of their symptoms, I was like, oh, that sounds quite similar to things that I do, and ways in which I present as well. So one of my lecturers in my current uni signposted me to the student wellbeing services and kind of said, if you think there's something else going on, the screening process is quite quick. Go and get screened, get an assessment, and see what comes of it. So I went through that process, and I think it took roughly about 2 months from the initial screening to getting an actual diagnosis. And what came out of that is that I actually had dyspraxia. So dyspraxia, it is, although it's like a coordination, neurodevelopment condition, it's something that can affect your executive functioning as well. So you can become very tired when doing work or handwriting or things. It can affect your concentration. It can affect how you process things. It can affect how you plan and organize yourself as well. And when I kind of looked at the symptoms that you can get with dyspraxia, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And obviously dyspraxia is a condition that you have from when you're born. So I was like, oh, okay, so this is something that I would have had my whole life. So throughout my whole schooling history, whilst I was doing my undergrad, I would have had this condition. And it really made sense as to why I found accessing education, particularly higher education, so hard. And I was like, oh, okay, it's not that I'm not intelligent and I don't know what I'm doing and I don't understand what I'm doing. It's just that I've had this neurodevelopment condition, and it's really affected how I've been able to access education. So as a result of getting the diagnosis, which I received earlier this year, I've applied for disability student allowance, which I've been given, and now I have a lot of different computer programs, a lot of equipment, just different tools to really support me for the remainder of my master's. And I'm looking at some of the things that I've been given, and I'm like, oh, this would have been really helpful during my undergraduate degree. These are all tools that would have really supported me. But I think after I got the diagnosis, and knowing that it's a diagnosis that is lifelong, it doesn't go away, it doesn't develop when you're an adult, it's something I would have had as a child. it did make me a bit sad because, knowing that I've gone through all these different school systems, and obviously there probably would have been symptoms that I had as a child that my mum probably would have seen, but
Mhm.
wouldn't have necessarily been able to attribute it to dyspraxia, because I'm probably sure if I asked her tomorrow, she wouldn't know what it is,
Mhm.
or wouldn't have known what it was, when I was younger. Um, and even with my sisters who are adults and have also been diagnosed with like ADHD, um, and they've had very similar experiences to myself, and how these things would have been very evident when they were younger, and again, just because of the cultural differences, or the fact that you know there isn't the knowledge of these in a lot of different parts of the world. A lot of these neurodevelopment conditions, although they exist um, as actual diagnoses, or knowledge of them is just not necessarily available everywhere. So as a result, you've got a lot of people who are having these difficulties, don't know they have these difficulties, have parents that don't understand why they're having these difficulties, um, and don't necessarily know how to support their children whilst they've got these difficulties, or might actually punish their children because they think their children are just like not concentrating, not applying themselves, not doing what they should do, and that ultimately will affect you as an adult and as a student, and just going through the trajectory of your life, really. um, but I think for me, it there was a lot of reflection, there was a lot of yeah, a lot of kind of like reflection on the implications of kind of having this condition undiagnosed for more than 30 years is quite it's been difficult. It's
Yeah.
been quite difficult. um and I think getting the diagnosis, it really helped me to make sense of like who I was as a person, and what my limitations were, um but appreciating that there wasn't anything like fundamentally wrong with me.
Mhm.
It's just that in certain areas, I need a bit more support, or certain things are going to be a bit more difficult for me than maybe some of my peers who don't have a neurodevelopment condition, or don't have any other kind of like additional needs. Um, and I think in many ways, it helped me to be a lot kinder to myself,
Mhm.
just because I had that understanding. But I think with the absence of that, you
Yeah.
can be quite harsh on yourself.
Mhm. Because it's not
Um,
to say you can't do the same workload that your peers do. It's just saying that you might need the extra support just to get through it, but it doesn't mean that your capabilities not being questioned.
exactly.
It is, I can imagine it's really easy to be hard on yourself and compare yourself, but once then you can be kinder and you can process it and allow yourself to go through it a bit slower, even just going through your work in your own time. You're still going
Absolutely.
to have, yeah.
Yeah, but you get that additional support. Like I have,
Mhm.
study skills support.
Yeah.
So I have someone that I meet with every week to kind of go through work and assignments, and that's something that would have been fantastic during my undergraduate degree. But um, the more I suppose. And I had to give myself a bit of a pat on the back. I was like, "Oh, okay, I made it through like a whole degree
Yeah.
without any of that extra support. I was really harsh on myself, and it was really difficult. But it wasn't, because I just wasn't applying myself.
Mhm.
It was actually difficult for all of these reasons. Um, and I think the reason that I wanted to come and tell this story, because I think um, there are probably a lot of adults, and a lot of people kind of in education and going through these systems are probably really struggling with uni work, really struggling with knowing what to do and assignments, and just feeling like they're being lazy, or they're not applying themselves, or they're just not understanding. And it might actually be that there's something else going on.
Mhm.
Um, and I think for me, I think I'm always keen to kind of like support people to you know, maybe, and advocate for them to maybe take those steps to find out if maybe something else is going on, and if there are other things that can be put in place that will really support them to, you know, complete their degrees and, you know, get through the education and get through the teaching. Yeah, so I think I felt it was important to speak about this topic today,
No.
and really try and advocate and, you know, support people to maybe start thinking more about, okay, you know, what else do I need? What other support is available for me? What support can I get? You know, regardless of whether you have a, you know, a neurodevelopment condition or not. There is always, you know, support within universities. There is always, you know, somewhere that you can go to maybe get additional help, and not being afraid to ask for that help. You know, whilst you're studying at a particular university, you're entitled to kind of get support and get help if you do need it. And sometimes, you know, a lot of that anxiety or depression or low mood, and maybe the way you're thinking about university and yourself, might make a lot more sense if there is something else going on. So yeah, I think it's really about just kind of being curious about yourself, being curious about the support that's available and actually accessing it, and not being afraid to access it. You know, there's nothing wrong with getting more support if you need it. Yeah, I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
no, it does. I mean, it's recognizing that you might need more support, or even just exploring the options. We at the university have study skills, we have a wellbeing service, we have disability mental health advisors that can do screenings. So, you know, it is great to your story, and then to just recognize that there are all these options here at the University of West London as well, and other universities that are the all universities. So it's really important to kind of take the opportunity, because you never know, like you said, you just don't know what you know. So you can go out there and see what else is there, what's available, especially with like study skills and things like that. You can have that specialist support as well, and have those one-on-ones as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's knowing that there is a plethora. You know, it's not necessarily just ADHD, it's not necessarily just autism, or, you know, really visible disabilities that, you know, you might be able to see. There are so many different things that could potentially impact how you access education and how you access learning, and, you know, your ability to actually do your work. And sometimes it's, you know, someone just going through a screening tool, having a conversation with you, and you kind of talking about your experiences to maybe find out what else might be going on. And I think, you know, particularly for me, I've probably had a lot of misdiagnoses along the way. So to kind of have that diagnosis of dyspraxia has been very affirming, in terms of, actually, you know, you've had this problem. It's something that has really impacted how you access the world, not just education, but how you access the world. And actually, you know, there are things that you can do to, you know, really support yourself, you know, giving yourself a bit more time. Something as simple as, you know, what the educational psychologist said to me is, you know, when you're doing a piece of work, if you think you need maybe a week to get it done, give yourself 3 weeks, because you have to be realistic about how long it's going to take you to put things together and organize yourself and plan. Whereas my peers could probably do that work in a week.
Yeah.
It will take me a bit longer, and I have to be realistic about that. But the fact that it will take me longer, it's not because, you know, I'm not intelligent or I'm not clever or I can't do it. It's just I need that a bit more time to kind of get things done. So yeah, it's been life-changing for me, I would say. Definitely.
I mean, yeah, it's amazing. Like, you know, you've, like you said, you've accepted and you kind of recognize it, and look, you're back to studying as well. So it's not to say that there's not a question on capability, but it's just a matter of recognizing that there might be more time or more support that you need that's there. It's all available. So it's just taking advantage of that as well, and using it.
Yeah, and I think whilst people are at university, I mean, if you're trying to get these diagnoses like through your GP, it can take years. And I would say the process through university is a lot quicker. So, you know, whilst you are at university, just make use of the things that you do have available to you and the support that you do have available, because you're not going to get it in the same way once you leave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so if any university students are signed in now, yeah, they signpost to the wellbeing teams, where they have all these advisors, and you can make appointments with them directly. So, yeah. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been super insightful, and I think you've given lots of tips to everyone that's listening on what they can do to support themselves and their well-being. We really appreciate your involvement in the project, and we once again just want to say that we would love to hear back from everyone that's been listening to the sessions. So if you just there's a short questionnaire in 2 questions in the comment section, so please do like and comment. We appreciate all your feedback so we can create more content for you with the project. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.